welcome to another Funky Friday at 5. I am your host, Mitch Hampton, and this is Journey of an Aesthete. My producer just contacted me and said everything sounds good. I have a new computer. And so this show in a way inaugurates a little bit of change in technology, a little more, shall we say, updated, upgraded, as they would say. And the one I had served me very well for, well, I got that in 2012. So it was a Mac from 2012 to 2022. So retired it, and we're in a new era. And I should make a few notes of housekeeping, as they say these days, the terminology. Tomorrow, if you happen to be in North Carolina, and if you happen to be in the town of Weaverville or driving by Weaverville, myself and Zach Page, the bassist, are going to do a duo in the morning of all times. And that's on Main Street in near Rodney's Auto. And it's actually, I should really make a plug, because Rob Magnum Pottery and Beth and Rob have had that incredible business for so many years. And they're celebrating, I think it's their 25th anniversary. And they've been doing this, art in autumn now for 25 years, right? And so I've been doing it every year and coming and playing my stuff, and I'm always happy to be there. And great crowd comes, and people really appreciate the music. And enough about that. That's in one little corner of the world, of the U.S. And this show is for the whole world, or anybody that can tune in. Our guest, unfortunately, this is kind of a little bit unwelcome news. I had to cancel because of some health problems, illness, and it's not COVID, but it's I don't think, and it's just these things happen, and so I wish her a very speedy recovery. She's in Los Angeles, and I'm here. And one of the great things about being online, of course, is that interestingly enough, you could talk to people all over the world. I talked to Shmudi Shankar, who's in India. I hope she's doing well. She is doing well. I think I saw some posts from her. She's having some family celebrations. And also, too, of course, I've talked to people in the States and whatnot. But anyhow, this is a coastal, West Coast, Los Angeles, Southeast. But it doesn't really matter. If any one of you want to talk to me now, if somebody cancels on me and you want to pitch in and come in, I'll try to keep up with you if I can. I'm going to go over to this chair. I don't really quite know how to proceed, not because of Darcy Leonard's cancellation, actually, but because I have so many projects I'm working on and so many things that I want to talk about that I really can't do it all. Certainly not in this show. So I have to pick and choose, and that's why I consider editing one of the most important parts of actually artistic creation. Some great films, as we know, are actually made in the editing room, or certain directors do that. Certainly not all. Speaking of directors, well, yes, of course. I'm going to talk a little bit about book. There's a lot of projects coming out. Off the top of my head, I think I'm going to be talking to Todd Berliner, who wrote a great book on 70s movies. The way that our podcast works is that we schedule everything ahead of time. So I'm going to do a book lunch. And the book lunch, the novel I chose for this book lunch is a new canonical, classic, contemporary novel by Don DeLillo called White Noise, that was written or published in 1985. White Noise is soon going to be a big, big movie. It's just been released, or was at Cannes, and it's coming to Netflix and the theater near you. Adam Driver and the people he likes to work with a lot, Greta Gerwig and Adam Driver and some other people. And the preview looks fantastic for this film. I mean, visually fantastic. I mean, I mean, I wish Noah Baumbach always made movies like this. It's not his style typically. He's got to be Mr. Natural, right? So he does, but it's great to see him do, use color and do stylization. It looks fantastic. But it's very different to me than this novel in a way. The novel was written many years ago. I think that that's gonna be. I'm gonna do that within a month. Next month, in October, Anna Shapiro is the guest. A tarot reader in November is Tanya. Love Buddha is her name. If you go to her YouTube page, you can see that she does readings, and she's a guest in November. And we just released Frank Lamandella, who is a person who does a lot of different things. He's had a career as a designer of accessories and bags, and even done, illustration of fashion. And then he ends up being a master chef, a baker, being on the Food Network, making special culinary concoctions for QVC and the Food Network. And so he does many things. Talking to him was really, really exciting, and that's available now. And so enough about all that. I want to talk about back to film. So I think that Jean Luc Godard was so I'm trying to get a sense of, well, already there's all these eulogies and tributes coming in from basically everybody in film. And what's really interesting is that everybody has a particular relationship to an artist or artists, plural, right? And so I saw the movie Weekend. I should say Weekend, but I'm going to say Weekend, from 1967 at a little theater, a little big theater called the Tampa Theater in 1979, which would have made me about 12. I don't think I'd seen a Godard film before. And it really was so, I don't know what word to use. It was just, I mean, it was one of the films that actually it kind of overhauled my whole psyche. And I watched it many times after that when I could. Now, this was in a period of time in my life where every time I wanted to watch something, it was in a theater. Wasn't really on VHS. Wasn't on a disc. It was just like in theaters, but partially because I like going to theaters. Partially because I was fortunate to be living in places, not so much Tampa, but Boston and New York, where there were 20 theaters showing older material all the time. So it's kind of like an education, right? And so Godard's film Hail Mary, which was condemned by the Catholic Church, was playing at one of the great movie theaters in Boston called the Orson Welles Theater. And when it was at the Orson Welles Theater in 1985, an arsonist burned the theater down. And there's a lot of stories whether it was a religious fanatic that did so. And I actually went to see. I had been there 2 days earlier, and then I read in the paper. The theater I was just in watching Godard's Hail Mary was burned to the ground. But I don't know the full story behind that. Maybe it was a genuine accident. There's these stories. I don't know. But I've seen everything. I think everything that he made, which is like 70 movies or something. It's a lot of movies. And I know I talk on here a lot about like Eric Rohmer and Jacques Rivette, who are the same era, and they're very different than Godard, although friendly with him. And there's just, and I didn't really know what to do. I have a clip set up. I can play a clip, or I can just talk like I am now about it. I think, one of the interesting things about him is that he approached making a movie as a kind of an opportunity to sort of make something artistic that could be like paint in sculpture and a figure and an illustration and a line and a text like a book or an essay, rather than what we think of as a movie. And so there'll be all these interjections and titles and things, and there's a philosophic, and I think he might have been the first person to really do that, I think, and do it as humorously as he did it, but also as he's French, very unique. And I don't really, and so I've been following his films, and now he's gone, and it's partly generational. I mean, people in their 80s are an older age than people in their 30s or 20s. I think that's how it works. And so, there's a lot I could say. In a completely unrelated field of music, Ramsey Lewis also passed a couple days ago. And he's somebody who I met many times, who I grew up listening to. And moreover, I think he may have been the first jazz pianist I ever listened to. That means before Bill Evans, that means before Herbie Hancock, that means before McCoy Tyner. So I must have listened to him when I was like a toddler, very early. And I think it's because a lot of people had his hit records, and that would have been, the 60s. And I'm going to tell a story about that, because I was listening to Ramsey Lewis, because when I was a little kid, I didn't have a musical instrument. I didn't have access to a musical instrument. And so when you want to play a musical instrument, you don't know how, but you have records, and you really love music. This is something that it's music. I was just crazy about all kinds of music. And I was crazy about Ramsey Lewis, and there was this little album called Potluck. And I think it was like the Red Holt and L.D. Young, that trio from the middle 60s. And he was doing covers of songs like I Gave My Love a Cherry and Loch Lomond and these kinds of things. And it was really, I was listening to him over and over again and really feeling it right here. It's in the heart and in the soul and the grit. And the really incredible experience that I had wasn't so much first seeing Ramsey Lewis when he came to our high school in Interlochen Arts Academy, because in the 80s he would come to Interlochen and he would play with the big band. That was, of course, a real treat. But it was actually a total stranger. I was at the Tampa Bay Center Mall, and I think I was about 8 or 9, and I was with my dad at the mall, and there was like a little keyboard set up in the outside of, I think, of a pizzeria, something like that. And I just remember it was very strange. And I heard this kind of music coming from the distance. And I said, I was bothering my dad, anytime there's music, I want to go to the music. It's like, I want to know where that music is. I hear some music, and it was just kind of, and I didn't really, it was like a little keyboard, and it was like, kind of a gospel, something like that. And I had heard music like that on record, but I'd never been to that kind of church at that time, or hadn't had the opportunity, right? So, and where is that music coming from? And why in the mall is someone playing like that? And there was a kid, playing like he had an organ here and he had a piano here, and he was just playing. And I'm a child, and I'm standing by him watching this kid play this way. And he told me, he was older than me, and I was very respectful. And he finished his song. And I said, you sound like that Ramsey Lewis record. And he said to me, that's how I learned to play, is Ramsey Lewis, and I also play in the church, as Ramsey Lewis played in the church in Chicago. And I thought, wow, meeting this strange kid who was really young musician, but I didn't yet have an instrument, didn't have an upright piano, and all these memories came flooding back when Ramsey Lewis passed, sort of growing up with his records, and the fact that he was completely fearless about embracing. I'm trying to find the right words. He was fearless about embracing not just the soul, of course, the soulfulness, but embracing just ordinary emotion, which is something that I'm very interested in what I do, is kind of embracing what I would say, or I don't know if common is the word, but something kind of he had a popular touch, and he was not afraid of that. It reminds me of this, well, it reminds me of this interview with Burt Bacharach, and Burt Bacharach was talking about studying with Darius Milhaud in the 50s. It would have been the early 50s for him, or 49. Because it was before he went to the Brill Building, before he was Burt Bacharach, right? And he said he brought in a composition to Darius Milhaud, who had also taught Dave Brubeck and different people. And he said, this piece I wrote was everybody was writing very 12-tone music, serial music and things like that. And Burt Bacharach brought something in and he must have been 18, 17, something like that. Mills College, was it? One of those California. And he brought in, and he was already Burt Bacharach. So he probably brought in something like this. He's like, he was ashamed to show it to Darius Milhaud, professor, because I think he brought in like something. I don't know, with something, something Burt like. Yeah, right, Burt. And he thought, this teacher's I'm writing this kind of music, well, Darius Milhaud said to Burt Bacharach, he said, and this may be a paraphrase, he said, never, when you write any music, he said, never be afraid to write something that feels good and it's from your heart and that communicates something to somebody else. Never, and he actually said, go ahead and write that if that's what comes to you. Don't run from it. Run towards it. Right? So that's interesting. And of course, that's his style. It's so interesting because that's the polar opposite of someone like Godard, who's so severe. See that, and on our show, I want everybody to have a place at the table. And so enough talking. I'm going to show you this little scene. This is from Weekend. It's a very famous scene in cinema. This is like famous, like the opening of Touch of Evil's famous, or 2001 Space Odyssey. It's like one of the, but it's I don't know. Is the not bad. I mean, it's, and the context is that, again, this movie doesn't really have what you would call a plot. And they're trying to go to the countryside, this couple in France, and it's completely hallucinatory and terrifying. And this is kind of what you have here. It's kind of acerbic humor, and so. So you should, if you haven't seen it, you should watch the full movie to see where that goes. It actually goes to a place really horrifying. And from the point of view of 1967, I think taboo shattering. I think in terms of its violence, but there's humor in it, and kind of so sometimes an artist like Godard has a lot of emotions about commercialism and cars and pollution and the silliness and the vanity and the stupidity of the human race, and puts that in a film in a very almost very on the nose. Actually, that scene, it's very clear. It's a criticism and a satire, and there's a deep place for that in art, and it's important. I think it's a mistake though if a culture only creates that kind of art, or if a culture thinks that that's more important and more than something that's more like the music I played, that's a little more gentle. I think there's room for all of it, and the whole point of my podcast is, again, have everybody at the table. People do this kind of film, people do that kind of film, make this kind of music. I mean, this kid I met came out of a church, and he was into the music of his people and playing on a piano and organ, and he came out of nowhere, and I was in this mall, and it was just like the music I was listening to. You know, it was like it was on the record, and now it was somebody who wasn't famous. It was a boy learning to play that way. And now I'm practicing every day playing music. So it's the chain. It's interesting. It's like the chain of connections, and the chain of what connects one artist to another person, and what inspires you, and then what you love. So I'm going to play one more clip, and this is Ramsey Lewis playing the blues, which he was the best at, actually. I don't think anybody played the blues really as well as him. I mean, he had few peers. Let me put it to you that way. And this is I should say this is from 1980, and so it might as well be 79 or 78. Because it's 1980. I mean, it's like it's just you'll hear, but it's just fantastic. And it's Um, that's Ramsey Lewis. You know, it occurs to me that that's actually a lot like that car traffic jam scene from Weekend. It's kind of durational. It's sort of like in not in the sense of content, but in the sense of that it's about here, right now, in that moment. It's interesting, right? It's really interesting to me. Anyhow, I hope that you got something out of that. So I'm going to end in a couple minutes. I'm going to wrap up here and say hi to my producer, Laurie, and thank her for reminding me about these important shows and schedules, and check out Frank Lamandella. And I am going to do that White Noise book lunch. I don't know which lunch it's going to be, which noon, but I think that you know, hopefully you'll tune in. So sorry Darcy couldn't make it, but I provided you with some entertainment, hopefully, and edification, and something to think about, and talking off the top of my head. One more thing. I think I'll wait till next time. Leave people. You have to leave people wanting more, right? I think that's kind of one of the rules, right? Thank you very much, and have a safe weekend, a good weekend, and enlightening weekend, even if you can. Thank you.